Developing tonight, new fallout after a pair of potential 2016 candidates address a parent's right to choose whether or not to vaccinate their children before they can send them to public school. We first told you about this yesterday. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie and Kentucky Senator Rand Paul sparking a media frenzy after suggesting that parents should have a choice in the matter. Oh, there's no question they should have a choice about whether to vaccinate their children altogether. The issue here is whether it should be mandatory before these children can go to school. Both men have since clarified, voicing their support for vaccinations, but apparently it was too late for some. Headlines suggesting this is a huge problem for Republicans. From the New York Times, measles outbreak proves delicate issue to GOP field. In the Washington Post, vaccination debate flares in GOP presidential race, alarming medical experts. And from Time, measles vaccinations, royal Republican presidential race. But is this really a Republican issue? Britt Hume is here for political analysis, but we begin first with Trace Gallagher, who reports from the very latest from our West Coast newsroom. Trace.
And Megan, during her presidential run in 2008, Hillary Clinton called for more research into a possible link between vaccines and autism. She tweeted now, quote, "The science is clear. The earth is round, the sky is blue, and vaccinations work. Let's protect all our kids." The New York Times said this, quote, "The vaccination controversy is a twist on an old problem for the Republican Party, how to approach matters that have widely been settled among scientists but are not widely accepted by conservatives." Former co-host of The View and avowed liberal Joy Behar then jumped on the bandwagon. Listen.
This is this Neanderthal thinking on the right that is really, it's scary and dangerous. Climate change deniers, vaccination deniers, I mean, they're going to kill us.
But the numbers show that this so-called conservative problem is having a liberal outbreak. There are now 102 measles cases nationwide. 80% were not vaccinated. And 92 of the cases are here in California, affecting very affluent and very Democratic suburbs like Marin County, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge, and Santa Monica. Areas where at some schools the vaccination rate is as low as 40%, about the same as southern Sudan. If parents don't want their kids vaccinated, they simply sign a personal belief exemption or a PBE, opting their children out. Turns out those PBEs are especially popular in exclusive preschools and daycare centers used by many in the entertainment industry, like the Kabbalah Children's Academy, which has a 57% opt-out rate, or the Waldorf Early Childhood Center in Santa Monica, where 68% of parents said no to vaccines. The bottom line, Megan, is it's very far from a one-party problem. Megan.
Trace, good to see you. Britt Hume is our Fox News senior political analyst. Pastel Britt is back with some thoughts on vaccines. And so Joy Behar is sick and tired of the Neanderthal behavior by conservatives. Just stand by, Britt. Like this very well-known conservative man who's been one of the most outspoken on the issue of vaccines. Watch this.
The science today, if you actually read the science, which most journalists don't do, the science is overwhelming that there is a link between the autism and the thimerosal.
No, actually. No, it isn't. Not at all. And he hasn't clarified. In fact, he doubled down just last summer with a book pushing that same preposterous theory, which has been completely debunked by science. Just waiting to see how long we could go without saying anything to each other. What do you think of that?
Well, Megan, you're asking me?
Yeah. What do you think of that?
Well, certainly neither Chris Christie nor Rand Paul has written a book on the subject. And RFK Jr.'s comments on this are obviously absurd. And I think that Paul and Christie both realized pretty quickly that what they had said, while they didn't say they were anti-vaccine, they both said they were pro-vaccine, but that they thought, parents ought to have some say in the matter. They both seem to be hastening today to say, look, everybody ought to get vaccinated, kids ought to get vaccinated, and obviously kids should.
Mm-hmm. But the issue here is whether, it's being sort of stated, I think, in a misleading way by some. No one is saying that a parent should not have the choice about whether to vaccinate or not vaccinate his child upon birth to walk around in the world. Some people are saying you should, no matter what. But the issue about whether the vaccines are mandatory or not mandatory relates to school. So if these candidates come out and say that you should have the choice and it shouldn't be mandatory, then they're effectively saying that non-vaccinated children should be allowed to go to school with vaccinated children, and that's A-OK with them. That is politically controversial, no?
Well, it is, Megan, but when you consider that some of the diseases against which these vaccinations are given are highly contagious. Measles, for example, is one. These communicable diseases, there's a real public health question as to whether vaccinations should be mandatory in order to protect not just the child affected by the particular shot, but all the rest of the children, should the kid come down with the disease. So, you know, there are serious public health reasons why certain vaccinations should be mandatory. I don't think there's much question about that, and I don't think that that it's reasonable, for example, for the New York Times to say that, you know, that conservatives, largely speaking, don't buy that. I think the Times provided really no support for that proposition. There are people on the right, and as you have demonstrated very ably here, Megan, on the left as well, who are skeptical of the whole idea and, you know, think autism might be caused by vaccinations and so forth. But the idea that that is a view that is very widely held among conservatives is unsupported by any data that I know of or anything that the New York Times reported in its story, which was clearly an effort to tar, I think, conservatives and Republicans with this this idea, this sort of anti-science notion on vaccination.
But this hasn't been a right-left issue. I mean, unlike climate change, for example, which is largely divided along party lines, not entirely, but largely, the vaccination issue really has not been historically at all. And you just listen to Trace's report about the counties in which the vaccinations are the lowest, you know, Marin County and so on. These are not conservative bastions. I mean, in a lot of these cases, these are Jenny McCarthy acolytes who believed her. And she had a very big microphone and a very big platform, and they believed her that once she vaccinated her child, he got autism and that it could happen to their children too. Fine, but now the science is really clear. Don't these people now need to come out and say, never mind, and I mean Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and these Republicans, everybody, to say, we were wrong.
Yeah, well, certainly, I would think so. There is a poll that says that 76% of Democrats now think that now believe that there's no link between vaccines and these diseases, and the number among Republicans is said to be 65%. Now, that's one poll, one time. I don't know what the margin of error is, but it suggests that an overwhelming majority in both parties believe this, and that politicians and others who are saying that this should, this is a question that's really a lively question out there, ought to stop talking about that. And I think that the two Republicans who did that have already done so. And my guess, Megan, is that there's probably not much left of this controversy.
Right. It's sort of surprising that it wound up on the front page, but that's what happens when you have a measles outbreak like we now have in the country. Britt, good to see you.
No, thanks, Megan.